Welcome to Connecting Dots, a laser-focused, quick-fire interview on food and the economy with international experts, where we seek answers to questions all of us should be asking. I'm Ajay Jakhat, Chairman Bharat Krishik Samaj of Farmers Forum India, as well as the Vice Chair of Action Track 2, Shift to Sustainable Consumption Patterns at the UN Food System Summit. We have a very special guest today, Jay Naidoo, who participated and has a very special place in the South African freedom struggle and its successful transformation into a multiracial democracy. Thank you, Mr. Naidoo, for taking time out to join us today.
It's a great pleasure, Ajay.
Thank you. So we'll jump straight into this question answer session. Mr. Naidoo, you spearheaded the Reconstruction and Development Program in the Mandela government. What were the conflicts and trade-offs you faced during the time, and what lessons can they hold for contemporary governments in developing countries across the world?
Well, we got to remember that in 1994, we were trying to reverse 350 years of a very racially skewed history in South Africa. So we had, stepped back from the precipice of a racial civil war, which the whole world sort of expected to happen. And we rose above the conflicts, and we had leaders of integrity like Nelson Mandela, who were able to find the common ground instead of, being in a position where we were the enemies of the past and divergent views on everything. And so I think that is a very important part of the transition being a peacefully negotiated political settlement, which became a political miracle. Now, we can transform a country through a negotiation, but all we do is create a safe space of a constitutional democracy within which we have to address the legacy. The Mandela generation were there to bring us political liberation, but it was up to leadership after Mandela to address the real concrete reality of apartheid, whether that was economic apartheid, exclusion, poverty, inequality, racism, access to quality education or quality health, access to housing, or basic needs of right to water or to sanitation or to housing. And all of those things became enshrined into a program that the African National Congress that Nelson Mandela led went to the polls with. And that's how we won the landslide victory in 1994. Then it was to take a program that is a program of a political party and then make it the program of a government of national unity, which included other political parties. And that's where I became the Minister of Reconstruction and Development in the office of President Mandela, responsible for a cross-cutting program that would try and integrate the different parts of government in a way that was promoted social cohesion, promoted economic opportunity, and fundamentally addressed the legacy of apartheid and exclusion.
So that takes us, carrying on your answer, that takes us today when you look at Africa, across Africa, you see in Namibia, in Zimbabwe, other liberated countries like Angola, Uganda, Rwanda, promises of the revolution don't seem to be realized. And there are allegations of mismanagement. What do you think could have gone wrong in so many countries across a whole continent?
Well, I think this is the history of the world. Liberation movements that fight for freedom, including in India, that once it transforms into a political party and you become a democracy and a sort of normal country, then the goal of all political parties is to stay in power. And I think that that's what is a fundamental crisis that we have facing the world today. And so I think the real issue is, how do we have the type of servant leadership that we had in the first 5 years under Nelson Mandela continue? How do we sustain that when in fact the entire machinery of a political party is to stay in power? So what are the requirements for us to build what we call a countervailing force? And that requires citizens who are active. We were freed in South Africa not because we had great leaders that included a Nelson Mandela, but because people stood up and said, we had enough, and we refused to collaborate in our oppression. And that's what we call an active citizenry. That's how we have good governance, and that's how we get good leadership, is when citizens understand their rights and they also understand their responsibilities, and they are organized and united, like in organizations of farmers that you lead, that are able to build the bargaining power of citizens, that challenge any abuse of power that comes from the political party in charge of government. And so I think what is indispensable in a functioning democracy is an active citizenry and an organized society, whether as farmers, as women, as students, as entrepreneurs, as youth. And these are what ensures that good governance is a reality in our lives in a day-to-day basis.
So these are problems and these are solutions that we have within the nations where people live. But when we also find problems from across the boundaries. If you look at today, if you look at the statistics, you see that 1 in every 9 persons sleeps hungry today. And most of those who are hungry are farmers producing the food. More particularly, if you look at Africa, since 2012, international commodity prices, including that of food, fell and stabilized. But the number of undernourished in Africa have steadily risen. Many view that WTO is driving farm gate prices below true value of production, compelling farmers in Asia and Africa, local farmers, to grow unsustainably and into poverty. You think it is time to rewrite the WTO rules, relook and oppose the power structures that exist in the food systems to make it more equitable in terms of number of people?
The food system is broken, Ajay.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's 1 billion people that go to bed hungry is a reality. The fact that there are 2 billion people in the world that face micronutrient deficiency because of our model of chemical-driven industrialized agriculture has poisoned our soil, and that we are growing food that is empty of calories, is causing many of the disease burdens that we face. Today, we know, even WHO has verified this, that 2/3 of the disease burden we face as humanity is caused by diet. And so food is a medicine, but food and its quality is dependent on the health of the soil. And if we continue to poison the soil, then we're poisoning ourselves. And this will greatly increase the disease burden of humanity. And even today, we know there's some significant evidence that the destruction of the natural environment is causing the release of pathogens like coronavirus. And that will continue if we continue in the way of exceeding the planetary boundaries of Mother Earth. Africa has 60% of the remaining arable cultivatable land in the world. Yet we're the epicenter of hunger. If you look at Africa, 90% of the food is grown by women. And I've talked to thousands of these women, and I know that they have the capacity to address hunger and malnutrition in Africa. And when we look at what are the barriers, it's they don't have legal access to land. They don't have microfinance in a way in which they could build their seed banks or their nurseries, or they could have irrigation. And even where they produce food, they're unable to get a fair price for it at the marketplace. So the entire system of food management and the food value chain has to be fundamentally changed if we are to address hunger and malnutrition, if we are to address the issue of women's empowerment, nutrition of our children, and health of our communities, or if we are wanting to create livelihoods or improve incomes of people, or if we look at a regenerative model, address climate change. So we have to change the system of food production and food consumption and food distribution and food pricing. And any organization, including the WTO, that stands in our path should be challenged boldly, because they are not acting in the interest of humanity. They're acting in the interest of an increasingly smaller minority of people, less than 1%, who today control the food system. We have enough food produced in our planet to address all aspects of hunger and malnutrition. And the question really is, we do not have food security at a household level. The purpose of agriculture is to grow food so that people can have 3 meals a day, and they can have, health and human well-being in their lives. And I think if that is not achieved, then the strategy is wrong. The model is wrong. And I firmly believe on that.
Which gets us to the next question. If you look at international trade in agriculture produce has increased, while farmers are becoming increasingly dependent on markets for their nutrition. In recent times, we have seen a greater consolidation of power and money in big agriculture, big food, big retail, and e-commerce companies. A few players in each of these sectors now have tremendous power on the majority of the organized food consumption, supply, and production. They influence policies regarding agriculture, labor, human rights. How dangerous do you think this power structure is? Can it be leashed?
This is the greatest challenge facing us as humanity today. The concentration of power in the hands of a smaller and smaller group of people and corporates. That is really driving us to the edge of that precipice of an ecological emergency. Inequality has grown in this past year of the COVID pandemic. And even the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has tweeted this and spoke about this, that the 1% made $5 trillion at a point where millions, tens of millions of people have been thrown into poverty, into hunger, into joblessness. The 1% continues to make money. So there's something flawed with the economic system that not only concentrates wealth and power in the hands of fewer and fewer people, but actually takes us closer to the edge of an ecological emergency. And today, we need to challenge that. It cannot be the type of evolution of humanity, evolution of consciousness that we need in order to create a balance between ourselves as human beings and other species that we share our planet with, and also a sense of harmony with Mother Nature, who gives us everything we need. And we continue to abuse her. And that cannot be sustainable. And that's why the science today is telling us, that we have literally the next 12 years in which to change our trajectory of development, of the way we live, or the way we work, the way we use the resources of our planet, or it's game over for us as a humanity, as a species. The Mother Earth has been here 4.5 billion years. It's not going anywhere. There's been 5 extinctions already in our past on this planet. This is the 6th one we are going through, which is caused by our human greed and our arrogance. Now, I think the biggest challenge facing us is not about planet Earth. It takes normally between 15 and 25 million years to recover from an extinction event. The real question is, do we have a right to be here? And until we understand that we have no dominion over Mother Earth, we are just here like any other species, not more important than anything else, not more important than a tree or a river or a mountain or a bee. We are just coexisting. And if we want to understand our stewardship role, then we've got to change the way we look at ourselves in relation to Mother Earth and the blessing she gives us. And that requires a very deep journey within ourselves to understand who we are, why we are here, and what it means to be human. And I think these are the most important questions we should be debating today, even within the UN, especially within the UN.
Which gets me to just two more questions. So, where as a farmer working for farmers or producers in India and now with the UN Food System Summit, when we see the facts, we see that the African continent has been recipient of 80% of the world food aid, NGO, multilateral agency funding. What is your opinion? Is it ethical and moral for individual donors and philanthropies to influence national policies, more specifically on your food? And what's been your experience in Africa on this?
Well, the experience of food aid, of course, there's food aid that is desperately needed in a situation of famine or extended drought or civil war or interstate war. Of course, that's needed. But a large part of food aid has got nothing to do with us. It's got to do with national policies of farmers within the United States or Europe that are highly subsidized and have built powerful political lobbies and produce food on an industrialized scale that is dumped in Africa. And the implications of that is that it crushes our efforts to build a sustainable smallholder-based farming model in which the incomes of particularly women are improved, in which diverse diets are protected and advanced. So I think that food aid is a double-edged sword, and I think increasingly Africa and the rest of the developing world should say, we want the type of funding that allows subsistence farmers to graduate into successful smallholder farmers, in creating shared services models, in creating the type of local diets that are what people have been accustomed to and culturally part of for millennia. And we need to have, in addition to that, the type of cash crops that allow us to earn an income on markets. But the purpose of agriculture and aid should be to support farmers, particularly women, getting a fair price. Women in Africa have said to me directly, Ajay, they've said, we grow the food, we work hard on the fields, we have to take care of our children. And then we have the middlemen. You know why they call it middlemen? Because there's no women. They come and they steal our profit. So how do we create a model where farmers have a right to the fair price for their goods and a real price? And we eliminate these commodity trading companies that have made so much profit and grown so huge through the hard labor of farmers on the ground.
I mean, very powerful words. I think so. You send a message not only to where you live, but across continents, which gets me to the last question, because about hope. You have said that Africa can't afford to have leaders tomorrow, but needs them today. Based on your experiences, what is your advice to the youth in all the developing nations where there is suppression of freedom and right to criticize, where journalists are being targeted? What is your message to them?
Well, my message is very clear. Question everyone and question everything. The system is not working today. The vast majority of people feel excluded from the benefits of an economic or even political or social system that exists. So we have to rethink everything. We have to rethink policies and laws and institutions. We have to rethink fundamentally, what does democracy mean? If increasingly it's been hijacked by predatory elites, and you have to be a millionaire in dollar terms to become a member of parliament in many of our countries. So how can that be democracy? And I think youth, I've said very often to them across the world, you cannot afford to be leaders of tomorrow. You have to be leaders of today. And my generation, the so-called baby boomers, who are holding on to power, if you look at our leaders across the world, most of them are in their 70s and 80s. They should be grandparents playing with grandchildren, being elders giving advice, rather than clinging to power because it affords them some degree of of benefits and a lifestyle. I think that what we need today is new blood, new thinking, but we need an intelligent cooperation between the different generations, also between men and women, between us and other species, between us and Mother Earth. We need an intelligent cooperation. And I hope that we can build an authentic intergenerational conversation where we can share our experience. And that's what we have, of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we can have a conversation that really begins to say, how do we co-create living in a world where we are more conscious and where we live more consciously on Mother Earth? Understanding we are but stewards for a short period of our lives in relation to the age of Mother Earth, and that we have a fundamental role to protect the heritage for our future generations. And one of the things I often use is say, we do not inherit our Mother Earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So if we really care about our children and our grandchildren, then we got to tread very softly on Mother Earth and be conscious of not just our rights, but our responsibilities.
Thank you, Mr. Naidoo. Thank you for those not only powerful words, but the candor of your conversation, by the message that you gave to the world. And from Bharat Krishik Samaj, we wish you all the best, and we hope you will keep giving these powerful messages and guiding the youth today into the future tomorrow. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you.